Grape or cherry tomatoes are basically instant sauce packets, and I'm gonna show you. 4 different ways I'm gonna show you. You're gonna be so shown. Larger tomato breeds are inherently more delicate, and thus they have been bred for shipping, not for eating. Tiny tomatoes are simply easier to ship without squishing them, and so there hasn't been the same market incentive to breed them for firmness at the expense of flavor. It's a mass-market fresh tomato with the taste and texture of a garden-grown heirloom. The only downside is you have to cut them one at a time, which takes a sec. I pinch the tomato from above and then thread my knife through the hole. I have cut my pinky doing this with the tip of the knife sticking through, so the key is to stick your pinky out like that. Very dainty, very demure. You could cook these intact, but they'll cook a lot slower and they'll have a tendency to explode as steam builds up inside the skins. It's usually worth cutting them all in half. Here's a meal I used to make for myself in college all the time. Cut tomatoes onto a sheet pan, maybe grab a shallot and slice it thin however you want, some garlic if you want it, but don't chop it too fine or else it'll have a tendency to burn. Onto the pan, along with a drizzle of olive oil, some pepper and salt, smoosh it all around to get everything coated. I'm not saying you have to get them all flipped a certain way, but just be aware that cut side down will get more char on the skin, whereas cut side up will get more cooking overall. Both options are good. Into a really hot oven or under the broiler if you have one. Perfect use case for a broiler. That'll take 10 minutes max. I'll drop some pasta into salted water. Orecchiette is a nice shape for this because the pasta kind of spoons the tomato pieces. The summer when I started cooking this for myself, I happened to have a nice little sage plant on my windowsill, so I will forever associate this with sage. I'll get some basil too for later. If you want the tomatoes to hold together in the final dish, then you have to stop cooking them before they look done. They're going to keep cooking and softening. That's enough. A spatula is best to scrape up the veg, dump it onto the drained pasta, fresh sage in there, maybe a little raw olive oil for flavor and sauciness. Just stir enough to combine and break up the tomatoes just a little, just enough to squeeze some sauce out of them. If you stir too much, you're going to end up with loose skins floating around in sauce, which isn't as appetizing. Delicious, fresh, high fiber. The tomatoes I'm using in all of today's recipes are cherubs from Nature Sweet, sponsor of this video. Some of the tastiest little tomatoes I've ever had. Great balance of sweetness, acidity, and umami. And check out that label. Don't refrigerate. Cold permanently shuts down certain flavor-generating cellular processes in tomatoes. Nature Sweet knows what they're doing, and they do it right. Check out this other label. Nature Sweet has one of the strongest fair trade programs to help out agricultural workers. Their community development fund has benefited more than 2,100 Nature Sweet associates and their families through routine dental care, free eye exams and glasses, nutrition counseling. Fair trade supports safe working conditions, environmental protection, sustainable livelihoods, and community development funds. It's October, which is Fair Trade Month, so celebrate by trying Nature Sweet cherubs yourself, and read more about Nature Sweet's fair trade practices with my link in the description, or hit that QR code. Thank you, Nature Sweet. Anyway, tomato skins are really good for you, but if you want something a little more refined, you could put a sieve in a bowl, dump in all of that roasted veg, grab a wooden spoon, and grind. If you're one of the 10 people in this world who has a food mill, this would be a perfect time to use a food mill. Just grind until all you have left are dry fibers. You could mix a few of those fibers back in to lessen the whole canned soup vibe this has texturally. A smooth sauce like this will work better on spaghetti than a chunky sauce would. A little basil in there. Flavor-wise, you get this amazing contrast from the fresh, barely cooked tomato centers combined with the charred, roasted exterior. Really complex, best of all worlds. Very special tomato sauce, but you don't need an oven. Let's do something on the stovetop. I got a few chicken thighs here. You could use breast meat, but thighs are virtually impossible to overcook, and they just taste better in my opinion. I'm cutting each one in half, and then I'm doing chunky strips off of the halves. This dish is like a hybrid between an Asian-style stir-fry and a fricassee that you might get in the south of France. Plenty of pepper and salt. If you want it more Asian, you could dust it with cornstarch, but I'm going French with flour. Toss to get a nice brown coating on each piece that will soak up sauce. Some oil into a wide skillet on pretty high heat. Get it everywhere. Dump the chicken pieces in along with any loose flour. It'll basically make roux in the oil for thickening the sauce later. Now I'm going to grab my wooden spoon and stir fry these pieces. Intense heat, never stop stirring. The more you stir, the less stuff will stick and burn. Scrape at the bottom of the pan, don't let anything burn. You can plainly see the pieces are still pink on the inside, gotta keep cooking. If it seems like stuff is gonna burn before the pieces are done, just pull down the heat. Keep going until they basically look like little nuggets. When in doubt, keep cooking, because thigh meat can stand to be overcooked. It's not like breast meat that turns to chalk. Alright, I'll push everything to one side and then dump in my cut tomatoes. The water that comes out of them should help me deglaze this area of the pan before it burns. Again, I want to stop cooking these before they look done. I've got some charring on the skins, that's awesome, that's enough for now. I don't want the tomatoes to fall apart. Here's a bunch of spinach leaves, any delicate green could work. I'll just let them start steaming while I run over here. It's time for that beloved Adam Ragusea signature flavor combination of tomato and orange. Zest the orange and then cut it, juice it into the pan while catching any seeds, maybe some more pepper and salt, and I'm doing a little butter to make this more Frenchy, but that's not at all necessary. There's plenty of sauciness inside the tomatoes. When I see the orange juice is starting to reduce and get thick, I will stir everything up, gently again so that not all of the tomato innards come out of the skins. If the greens don't wilt immediately, just give them a second, they will cook down. That is all. I'd say that's 2 portions if you make some egg noodles or rice with it. I will garnish with the raw orange zest, and that's all. Very Provençal, those flavors are. Very Frenchy Chinese takeout. Nice. But what if you're having a party? Well, grab a baking dish, a little olive oil, throw in some cut tiny tomatoes, season and toss. This is burrata, which is a composite cheese. It's fresh mozzarella stuffed with a kind of cream cheese in the center. Drop those in. Here I got some marinated artichoke hearts in a jar. Fish them out of their brine and drop some of those in. You could pour over some of the oil and seasoning that rises to the top. Under the broiler, this goes for just a few minutes. Meanwhile, I'll slice up a baguette for crostini. Cutting on a bias gets you longer, pointier pieces that make for easier dipping. You don't want the cheese to melt all the way, just until it looks like a couple of poached eggs with some patches of browning on top. Perfect. Throw in the bread to toast for a sec, and here we are. Plop that on the coffee table, maybe top with some nice balsamic vinegar, and you just dip the bread in there. Crazy good. And if anybody doesn't eat bread, the artichoke hearts are for them. You can use the artichokes to scoop up cheese and maybe a few of those instant sauce packets too.